All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. It's a month of service presentation of Homeownership Association Foreclosures or HOA Foreclosures. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods. And presenting today is our partner with Lone Star Legal Aid. We have Mr. Amir Bufui, along with Ms. Samantha Guzman, who's going to be presenting the information for you today. But also included in our partnership, we also have the Harris Central Appraisal District, the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Texas Legal Services Center, and the Earl Carl Institute. And together we make up a month of service. And basically, a month of service is the collaboration of all 8 of our organizations coming together on a monthly basis and offering a variety of different workshops, resources, and information to the communities that we all serve relative to asset protection, asset building, maintaining a generational wealth, and community empowerment. We know there are a lot of underserved communities that are out there that don't have access to a lot of information or don't know where to go for available resources that could potentially save their heirs property, their generational wealth, that can save their homes, that can save them money. And we wanted to make sure that we try to create as large of an impact as we can by coming together and collaborating and pooling a lot of our resources and initiatives together so that we can get the information out to the community collectively. This virtual platform has allowed us the opportunity to reach not only people throughout the city and surrounding counties, but also throughout the state of Texas. So if you are joining or viewing this presentation from any other part of the state of Texas, know that the information that does get presented during our workshops is relative to the entire state of Texas and Texas laws. So it's not just for the city of Houston or for Harris County. Also note that the information that does get presented here today and through any of our presentations where legal information is presented is for educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. However, we do encourage you to reach out to any of our legal service partners, especially those like Lone Star Legal Aid, if you are in need of any civil legal assistance for you to be able to apply for their services and kind of get more one-on-one information about your particular situation. If you do have any questions, which we do encourage you to actually ask throughout this presentation, please make sure that you try to keep your questions to be as general in nature as you can, as we are on a virtual platform. We are recording the session, and we are also broadcasting live on our social media pages on YouTube and shared on Facebook and Instagram. So we want to try to protect your privacy as much as we possibly can. So we don't want you to divulge any details, specific information about, where you live, your address, your family members' names, and things of that nature. So don't do any of that. In addition to that, there's only so much information that the attorneys can actually provide for you, considering we are on a public platform. So again, we do encourage you to apply for their service so that you can get your personal uh, your questions or about your specific information or your particular situation addressed directly with them. So, but again, we do encourage you to ask questions. If you are joining us on Zoom, please feel free to type your question into the chat box, and we'll make sure that it gets addressed at the end. If you are joining us on YouTube or on Facebook, please feel free to type your question into the comment section, and I will make sure that your question is addressed there as well. For those folks that are also on virtual, if you like, at the end of the presentation, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself, and you can ask the question directly as opposed to typing it in the chat if you'd like. So with that being said, there's a lot of information that's going to be covered here today. We do offer you the opportunity to go back and watch this recording, share it with your family members, friend, co-workers, your neighbors who may be having an issue with HOAs and potentially getting foreclosed on because of their HOA or what have you, so that they can receive their information as well from there. And plus they'll know, what resources available to them so that they can actually go back and potentially apply for the services as well if they find themselves in need. Let's see, I think that's all the housekeeping that we got. Oh, one more thing. We do get quite a few people that participate or that join the presentation, and this kind of reminded me from yesterday, that are from other organizations that are required to participate in these types of workshops. So if you join us using your cell phone or as a guest or something like that, please rename yourself with the name of the person who needs the verification that they are in attendance. So that way you will be able to receive full credit for your participation. Otherwise, I won't know that you were actually here and can be able to track how long you were actually in attendance. So do keep that in mind as well. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to have Mr. Amir and Ms. Samantha go ahead and introduce themselves and get right on into our presentation. So why don't you guys go ahead and get started?
You want to go first? That way I can jump right in.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Amir Bafrui. I'm a supervising attorney here at Lone Star Legal Aid, and I appreciate y'all tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about homeowners associations or property owners associations, truths, myths, and everything in between that all Texans should know. I'll turn it over to Samantha.
Trying to share my screen. Did you give me permission, Nia?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Let's see, it says one can share at one time. There we go. Okay, here we go. So my name is Samantha Guzman, and I am a paralegal at Lone Star Legal Aid in the Foreclosure Prevention Project. Let me see. So today we'll be talking about property owners associations, commonly known as homeowner associations or condo associations. Today's presentation is legal information only. It's not legal advice. For legal advice for your particular and specific legal issue, please contact your lawyer or a financial tax advisor. So our agenda today, we're going to learn a little about Lone Star Legal Aid. Then we'll move into understanding homeowner associations, followed by common issues with these homeowner associations. And then we'll end it with HOA-led foreclosures and post-foreclosure evictions. Here at Lone Star Legal Aid, we protect and advance the civil legal rights of the millions of Texans living in poverty by providing free advocacy, legal representation, and community education that ensures equal access to justice. Some fast facts about Lone Star Legal Aid: we service 76 counties, with 72 being in the Gulf Coast, in the Eastern and Gulf Coast regions of Texas, as well as 4 counties in Southwest Arkansas. We do have 14 offices that service those 76 counties, but we'll get into that a little further. And based on the most recent census data for our service area, there are approximately 1.9 million people that are at 125% of the federal poverty guidelines who are eligible for our services. In 2024, we assisted 61,289 individuals by handling over 25,111 cases. Among those that we helped, 32% were domestic violence survivors, 18.5% were senior citizens, and 7% were veterans. So who do we help here at Lone Star Legal Aid? Again, we help those that are at 125 at or below 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. We help children, veterans, seniors, those of the LGBTQIA community, people with disabilities, and those who are homeless. Majority of our clients are women, and a lot of our clients face isolation due to limited literacy, living in rural areas, and then have minimal access to the internet, Wi-Fi, all of that good stuff, and those who have language barriers. Excuse me. More than 1.5 million in our service area speak a different language other than English, and we are prepared and equipped to handle and work with those individuals who don't speak English. So in Texas, there is one attorney for roughly every 380 people in the general population. However, for legal aid, there is only one legal aid attorney for approximately every 17,000 people in our service area with income at or below 125% of the federal poverty limit. So one legal aid attorney for every 17,000 people. Again, sorry, I'm out of breath. Limited access to modern mass communication such as telephones, the internet, computers, cable television is also common among our client community. And there is little or no public transportation in most of the rural areas that we serve. Again, our mission at Lone Star Legal Aid is to protect and advance the civil legal rights of the millions of Texans living in poverty by providing free advocacy, legal representation, and community education to ensure equal access to justice. our eligibility, to be eligible for our services, you have to live in one of the 76 counties that we serve. We only work on civil cases. We do not handle criminal cases. We do not handle personal injury cases. And we only help those who are low income. Some general law types that we work with here at Lone Star Legal Aid are consumer, think credit cards, debt, bankruptcies, employment law, family law, child custodies, divorces, all of that good stuff. Healthcare, housing, juvenile issues, neighborhood problems. So it's not just a you issue, it's a whole neighborhood issue. We do have a unit for that. We work with public education and then financial assistance and public benefits. So think Medicaid benefits, food stamp benefits, Social Security, disability. Think of those when you think of public benefits and financial assistance. We also work with special projects here at Lone Star Legal Aid. We have a civil matters and criminal justice project that they work with expungements on criminal records. So if you need some assistance with that, please apply for our services. We have a community advocacy unit. We work with crime victims. We do also help with disaster relief, think FEMA appeals and getting all of that good stuff. We have an environmental justice unit, a low income taxpayer unit, medical legal partnership. And then we have a legal assistance to survivors of sexual assault project. So if you know someone who would benefit from that, please have them reach out to us. We also have our eviction right to counsel. So if you need help with your eviction or navigating through that appeal process, you can reach out to Lone Star Legal Aid for assistance. Then we have our fair housing, our military and veterans unit, as well as, last but not least, the best foreclosure prevention project, where we help you, your generational homes, your help with foreclosures, your property taxes as well. So it's not just saving your home from foreclosure, but think generational homes as well. So how do I ask for help at Lone Star Legal Aid? Well, if you do have access to the internet, you can submit an application 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at our website, www.lonestarlegal.org. If you don't have access to internet, you can give us a call at 1-800-733-8394. Now, you're probably watching us from the internet right now, but if you know somebody who would need our assistance and they don't have access to the internet, they can use that 1-800 number. Again, it's 1-800-733-8394, Monday through Friday during regular business hours. If you happen to live in the Houston area, our downtown location is also open Monday through Friday, and we do accept walk-in applications between 8 and 4 p.m. I did mention that we have 14 branch offices, and these are some of the cities that they're located in. We have offices in Beaumont, Belton, Bryan, Clute, Conroe, Galveston, of course, our Houston office in downtown Houston, Longview, Nacogdoches, Tyler, Paris, Richmond, Texarkana, and Waco. If you feel like you need to visit one of those offices in person, I would advise you to call them before you go and find the office is not open for walk-ins. You can follow us on social media. All of our handles are at Lone Star Legal Aid, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Amir.
Thanks so much, Sam. If you stop sharing your screen, I'll start sharing on my end. All right, everybody. I appreciate y'all tuning in. As Sam mentioned, we're going to be talking about understanding property owners associations, also known as HOAs. I wanted to take a quick step back. Lone Star Legal Aid does have 14 offices. We're headquartered in the greater Houston area or in downtown Houston, several offices throughout the greater Houston area, a number of other offices throughout East Texas and Central Texas. All of our offices are open to the public Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We do recommend you call before you come, because sometimes parking can be unfamiliar if you're not familiar with the downtown area of the office that you're trying to visit. It's a particular issue for people coming to our Houston office, but we try to be in the county seat for various regions. And if you're not familiar with the downtown area, please call. we try to be an accessible resource to clients throughout our 72 Texas and 4 Southwest Arkansas counties. So with that being said, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about property owners associations, or HOAs. So today you're going to hear a lot of acronyms. I'm sorry. That's just the easiest way to make this happen so that the information can be accessible and digestible and understandable. That's our goal here today. You'll hear the term POA, Property Owners Association. You'll hear the term HOA, that's Homeowners Association. I may even use the term COA, or Condo Owners Association. Under Texas law, all of these things are referred to as a Property Owners Association, but there are different rules for different types of these different subparts of Property Owners Association. What are they basically? Well, it's here written on the slide. These are created by contracts. These are nonprofit corporations. The reason that's important is there's certain rules that these have to follow. We're going to talk about that in detail for probably the next 15 to 20 minutes. Then we're going to talk about how these organizations operate. And then we'll end by saying some common situations where homeowners or condo owners get sideways with their property owners association and the foreclosure process that these entities, these POAs, have to follow. So if you're sharing this with a friend, or if you're at a time crunch and you just want to know about the foreclosures, come back in about 45 minutes. Until then, let's learn everything we need to know about the truth, the myths, and everything that in between that Texans should know about how property owners associations operate here in Texas. So, Property Owners Association basics. They're created as a corporation. In order to be a corporation in Texas, you have to have an articles of incorporation, and these have to be filed with the Texas Secretary of State. If you're really interested, you can find this information online by searching for the Texas Secretary of State, setting up an account, and paying a $1 per search fee to get access to these documents. Once you find the documents, they're free. What rights does a Property Owners Association, or POA, have? Those rights are listed in a contract. The contract binds the neighborhood where the POA operates. That contract is generally referred to as a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, sometimes referred to as declarations or CC&Rs. That is kind of the creating document that says, okay, this HOA exists, this POA exists as a corporate entity. That corporate entity is going to control this piece of land or this condo development. And then how does that corporate entity control itself? How does it run its meetings? How often are its meetings held? How much notice of its meetings are given? These are going to be set out in the bylaws. That's the second bullet point here. And then, does the neighborhood have a pool or some common facilities like a playground? Who maintains them? Who can get access to them? How do I get an access card? These are set out generally in neighborhood or community rules and regulations. So thinking about the powers and rights of a property owners association, really going to be looking at three things: the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the bylaws, and the rules and regulations. When you have all three of those things, you'll have a pretty good idea of what the rules of the road are for your property owners association. Now, who controls the HOA, or the property owners association? Well, it's controlled by the association's board of directors. We're going to go a deeper dive on how these things are made up, but people get appointed to a property owners association when it's new. And then when the association becomes more mature, more people move into the neighborhood, whether it's a condo or a subdivision, maybe out in the suburbs. Then there are regular elections every year or every couple of years to ensure that the board continues to represent the interest of the neighbors as the neighborhood changes. So a deeper dive on declarations of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or I'm going to refer to this as declarations. This is a contract that creates the rules and powers of the property owners association. And this is probably the most important document that most homeowners or condo owners are going to want to be aware of. I have the information here on the slide. I'm not going to read it. If you're interested, I suggest you pause and then read it yourself or take a screenshot. Declarations generally look like this. This is the first page of some declarations from a case I was handling on behalf of a client of mine, a client of Lone Star Legal Aid. It uses lawyer language, witnesseth, whereas these sorts of things, they're written and generally recorded. They are all recorded in the deed records for the county where the property is located. So if you look in the top right-hand corner, and I know this is small, you'll see a notation 12/29/82. That means this was recorded on December 29th, 1982. That was, 43 years ago now. A lot of HOAs are very old. They don't have to update their declarations very often. So if you see something like this, don't just ignore it. If you're trying to get to the bottom of what powers your HOA has, you're really going to want to start with the declarations. Here's another example of one of the more powerful sections in the declarations. And I've highlighted this for you. This is Article 6. That really doesn't matter. Different HOAs are going to have different numbers for their articles, so don't put anything on that. But the title, Covenant for Maintenance Assessments. So what are maintenance assessments? HOAs are created to help maintain a neighborhood or maintain a condo building. That's their job. In order to do that, they need to have money. And maintenance assessments are how HOAs get a vast majority of the money they need to do their job. If you live in the suburbs, like, Clear Lake, Katy, Kingwood, you probably live in a neighborhood that has a subdivision that has an HOA, and you're probably getting a bill for maintenance assessments once a year. If you live in a condo, maybe in a condo off of the Southwest Freeway, off of Bissonnette, looks like an apartment from the outside, but you own the box that you live in, that's considered a condo. You're probably paying maintenance assessments once a month. And those condos can exist anywhere one is built. I'm just giving examples that are common to the greater Houston area. If you don't pay your assessments, that is where knowing what the declarations say helps you understand what rights the property owners association has. The most common right, like 9 times out of 10, is if you don't pay, they have a lien, which is a property right. It's a fancy way of saying they can foreclose on your home. You are giving them that right when you bought into their development. You didn't sign anything. You did not sign like a deed of trust or a contract like you did when you take out a mortgage. But by buying into this neighborhood or buying into this condo, you are subject to this contract, the declarations. And almost all declarations have a requirement to, one, have the HOA collect assessments, and it'll spell out what they're going to spend the money on. And then 2, if they do not collect or if the homeowner does not pay, giving the HOA the power to an extraordinary form of debt collection, foreclose on your home to get paid. So that's why it's so important to start with declarations when you're trying to really understand what your rights and responsibilities are when it has to do with a homeowners association. Another example of an important portion in your HOA's declarations is there's always going to be a section that lays out the board of directors. It's not going to list their names. It might list the initial set of board of directors, but then it'll say, here's how membership's going to be set up. Here's how elections are going to be held. Some of the fundamental rules that the HOA as a corporation has to follow. Another common situation where people interact with their HOAs, right? They exist and then you don't really know about them until they contact you. So when I say interact, that's what I'm talking about, is when you want to make or need to make a modification to your home. For example, last summer, Hurricane Beryl came through the greater Houston area. It had a lot of strong wind, knocked out power, knocked out a lot of fences. In my neighborhood, people's fences were knocked down. The HOA in my neighborhood controls what the fence needs to look like, what wood needs to be built, and how high it is. The way people interact with that or navigate that process is most HOAs have what's called an architectural control committee, and that's what I've highlighted here on the slide. There's a separate set of rules for that. There's not a requirement that your HOA has this, but most HOAs do, because again, their job is to maintain the neighborhood and make sure everything looks nice, or maintain the building and make sure everything's kept in good repair. And the architectural control committee allows them to really drill down and make sure these rules are clear and followed. Now, some people who might get sideways with an architectural control committee, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I wanted to paint my house pink, as an example, or some color. And the architectural control committee says, no, here are the approved colors. I understand that and I get to that. We'll talk about, rights and responsibilities about in that situation a little bit later. So let's pivot to bylaws. As I mentioned before, most HOAs are going to have their own bylaws. As I put on the slide, these are used to govern how the HOA conducts the official business. This is to give predictability to both the board members and the neighbors, the homeowners who are subject to the HOA. When are the meetings going to be? Where are the meetings going to be? How much notice will I be given in advance of a meeting? Are they going to be held tomorrow? No, they can't be held that quickly. These build on the requirements for nonprofit corporations set out by Texas law. You can often find these on a HOA's website if it has one. If not, you have the right, either as a condo owner or as a homeowner, to ask for a copy of the bylaws, and the HOA has to provide them to you. Here's an example of typical bylaws. Again, sometimes these are recorded in the deed records. If you look at the stamp in the top right-hand corner, this says it was recorded on December 17th, 2012. They're not required to be recorded there. As I mentioned before, an easy way to find them is just Google search the name of your HOA. And if they have a website, more often than not, they will put this information on their website. Another powerful place to look is a website that was created by the state of Texas, which is HOA.Texas, the whole word, TEXAS.gov. And there you can search for the name of your HOA, and then it'll pop up with what's called a management certificate. This is, again, another document. And in the management certificate, it'll say, here's where the bylaws are. Here's where the declarations are. Here's who to contact if you have any questions. It's kind of a one-stop shop, great place to start if you're looking for this information. If maybe your HOA does not have a website, this is a backstop that was created by the Texas legislature a few years ago. Here's another part of typical bylaws, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. This lays out when the annual meetings are and when special meetings are supposed to be held and what kind of notice is supposed to be provided. Again, giving everyone predictability so that people can feel like they're being treated fairly by someone, candidly by a corporation that is somewhat telling you what you can and can't do on your own land. And this talks about how board of directors, people who are part of the HOA board that control it, that make it work, how they're selected, what their terms are. Again, this is not the set of rules for all HOAs. This is just screenshots from one set of bylaws from one HOA that I got involved with on behalf of one of my clients. But this is a very typical example of what you can expect. Now, rules and regulations, right? We've talked through two things out of the kind of powers and rights and responsibilities an HOA has. There's the declarations, that's the fundamental powers. Then there's the bylaws that say how they're going to run the meetings and how the corporation is going to govern itself. And then there's the rules and regulations that I teased earlier, where this is how the HOA is going to run the community, how it's going to give access to the pool, what app you need to download, how you communicate with the HOA or any contractors it hires, how you get access to the tennis court, or what parts of the grounds need to be maintained by you, and what flower beds are maintained by the HOA. These are really spelled out in those rules and regulations. Here's an example of typical rules and regulations. This is something that this HOA chose to spell out and cite to the relevant section of Texas law. Here's a clearer example. This is where they're saying, here's how you're going to get past the fence to get to the pool. And if you want to build your own pool, this is what you have to do. Now, this set of rules and regulations is a few years old. There have been, every 2 years when the legislature meets, there is always a little bit of tweaks on what HOAs can and cannot do. So I encourage you, if you're ever in one of these disputes, make sure you educate yourself. Don't just rely on these screenshots, because this, again, like Samantha mentioned, is legal information. There are rights, there are rules, things need to be followed. We're talking about a process, but this is not legal advice, this is how the process applies to you. So use this to educate yourself and then build upon that as it applies to your specific situation. So how do you get more information about your homeowners association or your property owners association? As I mentioned several times, Review the governing documents, the declarations, the bylaws, the rules and regulations. You can send a letter to the HOA by getting the management certificate by going to that website, www.hoa.texas.gov, searching your HOA's name, and then finding their management certificate, which will have instructions on who to contact and where you can find these documents. If you want to, just do it a quick and dirty way, again, search for a website. If they have one, great. You're probably going to find a lot of your information there. Any records that you want to ask for, you're going to be able to contact them using the management certificate and the HOA has to make them available for inspection, which means you get to come look at them. And if you want to make copies, they can charge you to use their copy machine, or they can print them out for you and mail them to you and charge you whatever the shipping might be. Here's an example of an HOA's website. Again, this is a few years old, but this is a very typical example. Not all HOA websites look the same. This is just what one looked like when I was representing this client. I Googled the name of the HOA. I found their website. They had a little tab titled Documents. When I went and looked at it, you can see there's the Articles of Incorporation. There's the bylaws. There's a folder titled CCRs. That's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or the declarations. And there's additional documents. This HOA chose to put everything very public facing, and there's nothing wrong with that. In my opinion, transparent HOAs are more well-run HOAs because everyone knows the rules and can make sure that they're enforced. So I've talked about this several times now, but here's my slide reiterating the hoa.texas.org website where you can search for management certificates. If you go to the website and you type in the name of your HOA, on the left side of the screen, you can see the filters. This is an example of what you will get. Your search returns will look like. You'll be able to access a PDF of the management certificate, after which you'll see on this next slide, this is what a management certificate looks like. Very powerful in that it, again, allows you one place to find all the information that we've already spent the last 15, 20 minutes talking about. So let's talk about POA boards, Property Owners Association boards. Who makes up the boards and who conducts the business of the association? So Property Owners Association boards, when a new neighborhood is built or a new condo is built, the developer or the builder is the one who's appointing the members of the board. Generally, most bylaws will say as more people move into the subdivision or more people move into the condo, generally they hit a 50% or 2/3 are owned by individuals. There will be an election, and at that election, you'll be able to elect, neighbors who are, want to help improve their community, want to work on the HOA board. Elected boards are generally made up, in my experience, of community-minded volunteers. And the thing to keep in mind is that HOA board members are required to be owners in that same community. That means they either live there or they own property there, and that gives them some rights to work with or on the HOA board. This is important to keep in mind because whenever there's not often, but sometimes when there's disputes between homeowners and the HOA, it can often feel like you're dealing with some faceless corporate entity. But the people in charge are the people who live and own property in that neighborhood, just like you. It's stepping back and thinking about those sorts of things can help you kind of find the right way to be persuasive and structure your arguments when you're working within an HOA to resolve any problem or get something done. So what does a property owners association board do? Well, as I put on the slide here, whatever they're allowed to do under Texas law. And then those rights are further restricted by whatever they've said in their declarations or covenants and conditions and restrictions, and then whatever they've further restricted by their bylaws. Texas law for nonprofit corporations is going to require that an HOA board have at least one meeting a year. Now, many HOAs choose to have meetings quarterly, some might have them monthly, but the minimum is one per year. Anything after that is additional obligations that honestly the HOAs probably created for themselves in the interest of transparency and to further that mission of keeping the community in good condition, whether it's a building or a subdivision. Now, there's a second party with HOAs, You have the nonprofit board, again, made up of your community-minded volunteers who are neighbors. But neighbors only have so much bandwidth. And if you have a nonprofit corporation, they might not be highly sophisticated in accounting or following the Texas laws for nonprofit corporations. So what you will often find is small, medium, large HOAs, whether it's for a condo or a subdivision, they're going to hire a professional management company. So now you're dealing with two entities, right? There's the volunteers, and then there's the management company who are kind of the front face, the customer service, the people who pick up the phone or send you the letters for the HOA. As I mentioned on the slide here, these are hired to do basically everything, all of the business of the HOA. In my neighborhood, they're the ones who send the letters. They're the one who send the annual bill. They're the one who maintain the email account. They're the people you contact if you want to rent the clubhouse for a birthday party. I do know the people who are on my HOA board because I'm a lawyer and I pay attention to these sorts of things. You don't have to be like me. What I want to point out, the reason it's important to know that the management companies exist is because they are another layer in a system that can feel like it's hard to navigate. But if you understand the process, you can work with the management company to get access to the board, again, to resolve any problems or just to get something done that you're trying to do in the neighborhood. Now, it's important to know with that background on the basics of how HOAs work that more HOAs are coming. Now, according to census data, and that's what this slide is referring to, I'm sorry, the Community Association Institute, which is a trade group that represents HOAs, a majority of homes in the United States are expected to be in homeowners associations or subdivisions with an HOA by 2040. And, if you look at the calendar, that's only 15 years away, right? That's one generation. Here's an example, and I know this is small, and I apologize for that. This is data that goes through 2022. This is census data that shows a trend in new single-family homes. So think of non-condos that have been built. If you look at the second to the last column, the percentage of homes that were in a homeowners association in 2009, new homes being built, there was 46% of them. In 2022, 66%. So 20 points change in 13 years of, homes that are being built in HOAs. Now, for homes that are sold that are already in a neighborhood with HOAs, so this is existing homes, not new built, there is an HOA for that neighborhood. Similar census data shows a similar trend. Again, using that same time frame, 2009 to 2022. Looking at that second to the last column on the right-hand side of the slide, you see a percentage distribution of homes sold in a homeowners association. In 2009, 62% of homes that were sold were in a neighborhood with an HOA. In 2022, 84% of homes sold were in a neighborhood with an HOA. So what this shows is there is a growing trend of new homes being built that are subject to HOAs and existing homes turning over or being sold that are subject to HOAs. And so it's highly likely that if you ever buy a home or you're relocating or you're a new homeowner, that you're going to have to interact with an HOA. And that's why it's so very important that the first 30 minutes or so that we've gone through on this presentation, people are aware of the truths and myths and everything in between that comes with HOAs. So I encourage you to pay attention, share this with people who need to educate themselves a little bit more on this very, very important issue. Knowledge is power, right? That's everything I just said, but I can't emphasize it anymore, right? Empower yourself so that you can't be taken advantage of or feel like you're being pushed around, because feelings get hurt when you think someone's just trying to pull the wool over your eyes. So let's talk about common issues with property owners associations. This is a screenshot from the Houston Chronicle from 2022. I keep using it because, you can't make this stuff up, right? A couple in Cypress in Northwest Houston were sued for up to $250,000 for feeding the ducks. That is an extreme example of an issue that can pop up with HOAs. It's not very common. Or is it? There was this Additional article talking about another HOA in Northwest Houston, and this was from 2024, so just last year, about an HOA hiring a company to shoot the ducks. I don't think HOAs have open season on ducks, but if you look at this article from 2019 about Pearland, south of Houston, the HOA was saying not to feed the ducks. Now, I use these three examples to illustrate a silly story to make a point. HOA's jobs are to maintain a neighborhood, and often that means controlling pests. And sometimes ducks or other animals can become invasive and destructive, destroying property, destroying fountains and what have you. So these three examples just show HOAs exercising their power. But all of it goes back to, again, their job is to maintain the neighborhood. Speaking on that same point, right on the flip side, property owners associations aren't trying to be your security guards, but they are trying to protect the neighborhood and maintain property values. And here's an example from 2024 of an HOA in Conroe that sued a gun range next to it because stray bullets were, flying into the neighborhood, hitting community property. When I say that, I mean like the neighborhood playground or, part of the HOA clubhouse, hitting vehicles owned by homeowners. And this is just an example of an HOA, again, exercising its power under its contract and its agreement with its with its homeowners to protect the community. So if you were to think about common issues and abusive HOA practices, first off, I want to give the caveat that I'm a lawyer, right? If everything I see is generally a problem or an opportunity, another way of saying that is I'm a hammer. Everything I see is a nail. No one comes to a lawyer when everything's going great. They're either trying to avoid a problem or solve a problem. So when you hear me talk about these sorts of things, understand that I don't just see problems in the world. I want to educate you on common problems, but not all HOAs just create problems. As I mentioned before, I personally live in a neighborhood that is subject to an HOA. That was a choice. Didn't have to do that, but I'm holding myself out as an example. Is that there are plenty of good homeowners associations. Don't let just this list, this list, and the next few minutes just kind of scare you off for them altogether. General dysfunction and mismanagement, that can happen with any business, but you can see that with a homeowners association. Debt collection activities that can both be informal and involve legal action and lawsuits. People can feel like they're being coerced into settlement discussions, settlement negotiations, my apologies. And then there can be personal disputes, right? This is my house and my neighbor on the board is telling me what to do. That can make you feel some kind of way. Issues are, there are lots of paperwork. There can often be lots of paperwork when you're just trying to get your fence rebuilt, or maybe you didn't cut your grass as quickly as the HOA wants. They're setting deadlines that might seem fake or arbitrary. If you get involved in the legal process where they're suing you to stop you from doing something, stop rebuilding your fence with the wrong color wood or the wrong size or what have you, or make sure you pay your assessments. Once you're involved in that, the paper's flying fast and furious. The bill can look like it's just growing exponentially. This process can feel very, very overwhelming, and expenses increase very, very quickly if you're ever in a legal dispute with your homeowners association, which when it's impacting the place where you lay your head at night, your home, can not only just feel like it's attacking your wallet, but attacking the safety and the sanctity of your home. Those can cause a lot of hurt feelings. It's important to understand these things can happen and try to respond as much as you possibly can with a level head so that you can get to resolution as quickly and efficiently as possible. Ways to, well, I just touched on this, but I do want to emphasize, it's natural to feel strongly and react accordingly with emotion if you feel like the tranquility of your home is threatened. I'm not going to talk about, say every word that's on this slide, but that's something that I think is applicable to a lot of issues that can pop up with homeowners associations. The most common issue, I've already talked about a few, but the most common issue homeowners have with the property owners association is they fall behind on payment of their assessments. And I can't emphasize this enough. There is no situation where you should not pay your assessments, right? You lose your job, I completely understand. If there's a death or a divorce or disaster or a disability that causes, economic harm, I completely understand. Just understand that almost every HOA has the right to foreclose on your home if you don't pay your assessments. If you stay current on your assessments, and we're going to talk about this in more detail, they do not have that right. They can't take your home if you continue to pay that bill. So let's talk about a case study in potential HOA abuse. And I highlight these because, right, you have to prove things in court for them to be true, but it's important for people to know about the potential for these sorts of things. In Houston, the board of a condo owners association may have been abusing its powers and in the process forced out fellow condo owners. Here's a screenshot from the story that ran in 2019. The link is here on the slide. But the backstory was basically homeowners lived in a condo where they're paying assessments monthly, and the HOA board indicated that it needed to raise those monthly assessments, and many of those homeowners were on fixed income. The board does have the power to raise the assessments, again, towards the goal of keeping the community in good condition. But that made some of the existing homeowners, especially those on fixed income, feel like they were being forced out. Whether they were right or the HOA was right is something for the courts to decide. I do know there was a lawsuit involved. I wasn't part of it. So let's talk about POA-led foreclosures and the subsequent eviction process that can and sometimes does happen. As I mentioned before, your POA, your homeowners association, probably has a lien that allows it to enforce its rules by threatening to foreclose and actually foreclosing. What does foreclosure mean? It's just a very powerful form of debt collection. You don't pay, they can take your house. They'll sell your house. If they're owed $5,000, they'll sell your house for $5,001, take their $5,000 and give you the $1. That's a very atypical example, but I just do that for simplicity's purpose. The lien right means your HOA most likely can foreclose on your home. I've been a lawyer for almost 13 years. It'll be 13 in November. And I've been helping homeowners exclusively since 2015, so about 9 years. In that time, I've helped a lot of homeowners with HOA issues. I've only seen one HOA that did not have a valid lien, meaning the right to foreclose. One out of hundreds of clients that I've helped in those situations. HOAs have been around since at least the 1950s, and they've all have access to lawyers who know how to write, their contracts so that they have their lien. Don't assume that your HOA does not have the right to foreclose. This is a huge myth that I spend a lot of time with my colleagues trying to dispel. HOAs have the right to foreclose and take your home. Even if you have a mortgage, the HOA can foreclose, the mortgage company won't know about it, and then you're stuck getting mortgage payments, or mortgage statements saying you got to keep paying, but your house has been foreclosed, you don't own it. What do I do? In those situations, again, we're getting into legal advice. I really encourage you to sit down and talk with a lawyer about what is the best thing for you to do going forward. So talking about foreclosures generally, so we're taking a step back from how they work just for HOAs. We're going to talk generally and then get more specific. As it's written on the slides, Texas is what's called a non-judicial foreclosure state. That means you don't have to go to court to have your house foreclosed upon and sold. Mortgage companies have this right. So they have to send a couple of letters by certified mail, then they can schedule your house to be sold at a public auction, which are held on the first Tuesday of the month. I've laid this out here on the slide. The first notice is the first letter is called a notice of default. If you don't fix the problem in that time period, the second notice will be sent to you saying, hey, your house has now been sold or scheduled to be sold. We're putting this letter in the mail 21 days in advance. And those foreclosure sales in advance of a foreclosure sale. And those foreclosure sales can only happen on the first Tuesday of the month. So here we are on April 24th, 2025. We've already passed the first Tuesday of the month for April, which oddly enough was April Fool's Day, April 1st. But the first Tuesday in May is May 6th, 5/6. If anyone that you know has received a notice either from a mortgage company or an HOA, that indicates, hey, there's going to be a sale on May 6th, it's more than likely legitimate. And I highly encourage that person to talk to a lawyer about how to manage this situation, whether it's I'm going to sell and move or I want to fight to stay. Just don't stick your head in the sand. HOAs, as I mentioned before, HOAs can only foreclose if you owe maintenance assessments. That either annual bill if you live in a subdivision, some kind of single family style house, or the monthly bill if you live in a condo. Townhomes I know are common or becoming more common in the greater Houston area. Townhomes are kind of in a gray area. They might be considered a single family home. They might be considered a condo. It really just depends. The easiest way to know is if your townhome shares a wall with another townhome, like they're literally wall to wall, it's more than likely a condo. If there's even like 3 or 4 inches or more often than not 3 feet of space, you're probably a single family home and subject to the rules for that type of HOA. HOAs cannot foreclose for non-assessment violations. What do I mean by that? You didn't pick up the trash, right? Today's trash day in my neighborhood. I forgot to bring in the trash can for 2 weeks. I didn't do that, but this is an example. You painted your house what's called a non-conforming color. Oh, your house is, bleached white. Well, all the houses in our neighborhood are eggshell white. We're going to fine you until you fix it. They can't foreclose on your house. They can definitely fine you, but they can't take your house to get paid. You have a car that has not been moved in 2 years. If it's against the HOA's rules, that is something that they could fine you for. Another common one is allowing your roof to fall into disrepair. Most shingled roofs in Texas last for about 10 years, even though they're called 30-year roofs. If your roof falls into disrepair and there's clear spots missing shingles, your homeowners association might have the right to fine you, but they cannot, say it with me, y'all, foreclose on your property. There's other examples of non-assessment violations. I could go on for slides and slides, but I wanted to emphasize, if you pay your assessments, your monthly assessments, if you're in a condo, or your yearly assessments, if you're in a subdivision, your HOA will not have the right to foreclose on you. So HOAs foreclose, go through the process of legally collecting the debt they're owed, and then selling your house to get it in different ways. So on one side of the screen, you'll see what I refer to as subdivision style homes, like a single family home that's detached from another building. It has its own yard generally. It might be tiny, but you have your own yard. And then condo owners associations, where the buildings, again, are pretty much right next to each other. Most people think of condos as high rises. Those do exist in Texas, in the greater Houston area. Very common condo example in our area are buildings that they used to be apartments. They were built in the 60s. Then when the oil crash happened in the early to mid 80s, the owners of those apartments could no longer find anybody to rent. So they converted them to condos and just started selling them off piece by piece. Not physically ripping them apart, but like selling them off. And now the new owner is responsible. They look like apartment buildings from the outside. They're generally on the southwest side and west sides of Houston, but they are condos. That's a common way of finding condos in, again, the greater Houston area. So how does the foreclosure process work? Quick and dirty version, if you live in a subdivision style house, you got a lot more rights and legal protections than you do if you have a condo. I'm not saying you're out on the street. If you own a condo, hear me out. If you live in a single family home, before the HOA can foreclose on you, they first have to send a pre-collection letter mailed to you, 45 days, giving you 45 days and certain rights, saying, here's the letter. We're sending it by certified mail. That means someone needs to sign for it. You got 45 days to pay, and then they give you the exact amount of money. And then they will warn you that and also in the letter, they have to spell out that you can ask for a payment plan. And they also have to spell out, if you don't pay after 45 days, we may kick this to our collection agent, AKA attorney, and then the bill will go up. Additionally, after those steps are followed, the HOA has to file a lawsuit. And in the lawsuit, they're going to have to get a court order that allows them to then schedule your house for that public auction foreclosure sale. They cannot foreclose until they've sent the letter, waited 45 days, kicked to their lawyer, filed the lawsuit, gotten a court order. Now I'm going to hand number 2, and then sent the notice about the foreclosure auction. They got to go through a bunch of steps. You have a lot of protections. It might seem like the deck is stacked against you, but you have a lot of protections and process to slow things down and get things worked out in single family homes. For condo owners association, it's a mixed bag. Some condo owners associations voluntarily agree to follow that same process. They do not have to under Texas law. Condo owners associations, the bare minimum that they're required to do is let you know that in a letter, hey, you're behind on your assessments. This is how much you have to pay. They do not have to offer you a repayment plan, but many do. And then if you don't pay, if you don't fix the problem, then they have to send you a letter that says we've scheduled your home for a foreclosure auction. This is the day. Notice they do not have to file a lawsuit. Some condo owners associations do, but they're not required to do so under Texas law. I only went through 3 fingers for that, right? Let you know about the problem, schedule the foreclosure auction, actually foreclose. You don't have that many rights as a condo owners association, typically. Now, that does not mean that a condo owners association can't hold itself to a higher standard. Many do, as I mentioned before, but they're not required to do so. This can make it seem like the deck is even more stacked against condo owners associations. But I encourage you, don't just stick your head in the sand. I know I keep coming back to that, but engagement, empowerment, knowledge, and staying in communication to try and figure out what the problem is and how you can solve it. More often than not, the people that run these organizations, again, volunteers working with management companies, they're not looking to foreclose. They're looking to do their job, which is maintain the neighborhood. And that means making sure everybody pays on time. If you stay current on your assessments, you're never going to have to know any of the stuff about foreclosures that we just walked through. Now, if the worst were to happen and your home were foreclosed, whether you're in a single family home or a condo, you do actually have a right to buy it back. Under Texas law, this is what's called the right to redeem. Again, single family homeowners, those subdivision style houses, you have 180 days, about 6 months from the date of the foreclosure auction. This is under Texas Property Code 209.011. So that means you have 180 days to get the money to repay the HOA to get title back to your house. Because at a foreclosure auction, literally what will happen is the rights to own your house will be sold off. And whoever the highest bidder is, whether it's the HOA itself or anybody off the street with the cash, will become the new owner. And then you're a tenant. And then as the tenant, you're going to try to redeem or buy back your property by paying either the third party off who bought your house exactly what they paid for it, or paying back the HOA everything that they claimed was owed. For condo owners association, you do have this exact same right. It's just you only have 90 days. And this is provided, provided for under Texas Property Code 82.113 subsection G as in goat. So it's important to know these sorts of things. And it can be confusing as a foreclosure happens. That's confusing and scary. Then you're hearing what I'm sharing today, that you have the right to buy it back. But during this process, the HOA, whoever bought your house, can still evict you during this time frame. This is not, I live in a single family home, I have the right to redeem, so I got 180 days to stay in the house and fix it. You don't. The new owner can evict you during that time frame. Same thing with condos. The new owner can evict you within that 90 days. And so you're really fighting with 2 arms behind your back. That's why it's so very important to empower yourself with the legal information that we're talking about today. Don't ignore it. There's a story about an elderly woman, a senior citizen, who got bad news from her HOA. And so she had a bad news drawer where she would just stick the letters and not read them. Don't be that person, because these are threats to your home, which is often people's biggest investment. And it's the place, where you lay your head at night and take care of your family. Pay attention, empower yourself, and stay in control. Now, the eviction process is laid out here on this slide, and then in further detail on this next slide. If your house is sold and a new owner, whether it's the HOA itself or some third party off the street who just bought it, contacts you, he or she cannot just kick you out of the property. Now, this is the state of Texas law now. It can always change, but Texas law requires anyone trying to evict to go through several steps. It's quick. but there are steps to protect people. You can't just be kicked to the street. You can't show up with a gun and say, get out. They're not allowed to do that. Texas law requires the first thing to be done is the new owner give you what's called the 3-day notice to vacate. Now, I know that seems quick. It is, but this is the requirement under Texas law. Hand it to you, hand you this notice, tape it to your door, mail it to you. And if you don't get out within those 3 days, then they have to file an eviction lawsuit in the local justice of the peace court or JP court. These JP court eviction lawsuits, once they're filed, generally you're going to have court within about 2 weeks from the date that they're filed. So let's take a few steps back so I can illustrate how quickly these things can work. Your house is sold. The new owner, maybe the next day or the next week, contacts you and gives you the 3-day notice to vacate. So we're counting 3 days out. Day 4, they file the eviction lawsuit. Now we're looking at somewhere between 10 and 14 more days. I don't have that many fingers, but we're looking at somewhere between 14 to 17 days from the start of the eviction process. And now you're in court, and the new owner is trying to get a court order saying this person needs to be removed from my property. And if you lose at that justice of the peace court trial, you do have the right to appeal and get yourself some more time to either buy back the property or show why you should not be evicted. You have 5 calendar days, but now we're at, collectively 19 to 22 days in the property. If you don't appeal within that 5 days, on day 6, the sheriff, the new owner can ask the sheriff or constable to kick you out of the property, and now you're homeless. This process can take as short as 3 weeks, is the point I'm trying to make. Hopefully you never find yourself in this situation. If you're going through the foreclosure process, the eviction process, I encourage you to reach out. There are legal resources like Lone Star Legal Aid, like other nonprofit law firms. If you have the means, contact a private attorney who can help you walk through this process and advise you so that you have the clarity of information to dispel the myths and be able to have the dignity to make the decisions that work best for you and your family. Now, I have this slide here because Sam already went over it, but I wanted to reiterate that Lone Star Legal Aid puts out trusted, vetted legal information regularly, and we try to put it out in places that people will see it. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. I'm a licensed attorney. I had to go to school for 7 years, pass a couple of tests, and continue to show that I know what I'm talking about through continuing legal education. You can trust the vested legal information that you get from Lone Star Legal Aid because all of my colleagues had to go through that same process. Do not trust Google Lawyer, right? Or trust but verify. I would encourage you also to check out our website. It's listed here, lonestarlegal.org. You can actually subscribe to our website and get updates there. Subscribe to any of our social media channels, get updates there. So again, if you're ever facing a legal situation, not just foreclosures, not just evictions, but a wide variety of civil legal problems, Lone Star Legal Aid exists to put out trusted, vested legal information so that people can make, empowered decisions. I appreciate y'all's time. That's the end of the presentation.
All right. Let me see if there are any. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was trying to play around with my sound over here and it's not giving me some issues here. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. And I'm also looking at YouTube here at the same time and the other social media pages just to be on the safe side before I started asking my question, because I always have some.
Absolutely. You got all those insightful questions for the people.
Well, I've been in real estate for quite a while. Plus, with the nonprofit, we come across quite a few different things and different scenarios and doing these workshops, and then we hear all kinds of things from different people. What do you do when there's that conflict between, maybe not even conflict, but when you've got a property management company that actually doesn't do what they're supposed to do versus what the HOA is supposed to allow? So, for example, I just so happen to be I'm just use myself as because it's always something. I'm always calling Amir. My HOA is doing this and blah blah. So like again, example. I've been where I've been living for the past 5, 6 years or so, or something like that. And all of a sudden, there was an audit done, and come to find out that the property management company has not been doing what they were supposed to have been doing. So the fees that they were supposed to have been charging, they have not been charging in 5 years, apparently. And now all of a sudden, yeah, we supposed to be collecting these fees from you on top of your HOA that didn't know about, didn't tell us about, didn't, you know, what is somebody supposed to do in that regards when it's like, well, you guys haven't done what you're supposed to do, and nobody ever told me I'm supposed to be paying these fees. So now I got additional fees I'm supposed to pay, and I'm supposed to back pay you for 5 years? Like,
Yeah.
no.
So it definitely makes you give it a side eye. I saw you doing that. And I think that's pretty common. Like, this doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah.
The first thing I would talk to you, what I would suggest to anyone in that position, not just yourself, is Texas law sets a limit on how far back a debt can be collected. So because HOAs are created by a contract, any debt tied to that contract, aka these maintenance assessments, in my opinion, would be subject to this limit, which is 4 years. So you mentioned 5, right? If there's debt that's older than 4 years, I would then negotiate or work with a lawyer to negotiate with the HOA to say, I get it. I'm going to pay back some of this, but this, what lawyers would call time barred debt or old debt, I'm not going to pay you. And here's why. And then at that point, the HOA can either, with its counsel, it's going to have a lawyer, accept your position and then, work with you to resolve the rest of the debts, or say, no, we're going to collect. And then, you're dealing with a foreclosure potential, a foreclosure lawsuit where you'll be able to make your same defenses. This is time barred debt in front of a judge. And I will tell you, I can't speak for all the judges, and I can't speak for any judge, honestly, but most judges don't want to see people lose their home. And HOA debts are generally small dollar amounts. Like the HOA itself might be owed $1,000 or $2,000. And then the attorney's fees, right? Attorneys should be paid for their time. I'm biased, but the attorney's fees end up being $10, $12, $15,000, and the house is worth $300. You put those kind of facts in front of a judge, he or she's going to look at it with a side eye as well and look for ways to cut the bill. Do you ever want to be in court literally litigating this issue? No, no one wants that stress. As a lawyer, it's my job to take on your problems and help you navigate the process. I speak legalese. I know where the courthouse is. I'm your translator and guide. But that doesn't mean I can take your stress away, especially when it's your home. Long explanation. Coming back to your question, I would negotiate with the HOA. And it sucks that you're going to have to pay something. Don't think about it as
we're not even talking about the annual assessments. We're talking about something else, like other stuff that they were supposed to be charging for and never did.
Yeah. And so your homeowners association board needs to take a long, hard look at the contract they have with that management company and probably look into what rights they have. But that's not you as a homeowner. You don't have the ability to enforce that right. It's the nonprofit entity, the HOA, enforcing it against a contractor, the management company that they hired. How it interacts for you, it kind of goes back to my prior answers. Is it debt that's older than 4 years? Because it's going to be tied to the HOA has the right to collect it for you under this contract. Well, those rights aren't, indefinite or in forever. They're limited to, if it's more than 4 years old, do you have a strong legal argument to say, I ain't going to pay that really old bill, or at least a portion of it?
And now me, as a homeowner, can a homeowner request, I want to see where this contract was supposed to be, to say, you're supposed to collect this fee from the homeowners in this subdivision. I want to see the contract that shows you're supposed to charge me X amount of dollars.
Yes. So this is both condo owners and subdivision, how single family homeowners have that right. It's, kind of, there's a saying, sunshine is the best disinfectant, right? You're entitled to ask your HOA for its records, and that includes people that it hires, how much it spends on those sorts of contracts. They don't have to give it to you for free, right? They can charge you to produce it and make copies of it. They can let you look at it for free, but they're required to make this information available. Because if you think about it, it just makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. It just makes sense. Um, they can't just make up a bill and say you've got to pay and owe it, right? If you have questions, they have to produce it. This is a business that is saying you owe us money. Okay, what am I paying you for? You have to produce that information.
And I've also been trying to request information that shows what the HOA is responsible for paying, what's included in my annual assessments. Like, what am I paying you every year for? What is that supposed to cover? Are they required to give you that information as well?
Yeah. So HOA, that's basically going to be their budget, right? Like they're going to have to, they're going to, as a nonprofit, they're going to have an annual meeting. And at that meeting, they're going to have to say, this is how much we collected. This is what we spent it on. And you don't have to necessarily, as a homeowner, agree with it. I know my association spends like $50,000 on flowers for the neighborhood, like, planting them. It makes the neighborhood look nice, but that's a large sum of money. Personally, I wouldn't agree with it, but I don't have the power to influence that. I'm not on the board. I can vote and, try to get other people elected. But coming back to directly answer your question, you are entitled to get that information. And then you can act on that information how you want, right? Like run for the board, vote for some, help somebody campaign to join the board, or try to speak up at a board meeting and say, hey, we should try to spend less money, to, again, make the HOA meet its mission, but do so in a way that helps more of the neighborhood,
Okay.
or is in better alignment with what neighbors want.
Gotcha. Being in real estate, and I know there's another realtor colleague that's actually on the call here. It's really incumbent when you go for new homeowners, for folks that don't know what HOAs are and how these things work. They're just so used to signing those documents, oh, well, there's an HOA. I'm supposed to just acknowledge that there's an HOA and here you go. Well, all those bylaws and all the other kinds of stuff, as much as you don't want to read it, you should probably go back and read all of that stuff that tells you what an HOA is charging you for, what exactly it is that they're supposed to be, what exactly it is that they're spending their money on, what are your what are their responsibilities, and so on and so forth. So try to definitely encourage the clients to do that. In addition to that, for homeowners that have renters, should landlords give their tenants copies of some of this information so that their tenants know you can't open up a garage in your front yard and start overhauling motors, and then then all of a sudden the homeowners now hit with fines and assessments and fees and things because their tenant is opening up a local garage in the neighborhood or something like that. Would you
Yeah, yeah.
encourage homeowners to do that?
I absolutely would. And it goes back to the theme I tried to be consistent about in the presentation today, which is open and honest communication. Make sure you get rid of like the misunderstanding. A lot of emotion comes from misunderstanding. And so if you don't tell your tenant in writing and share with them the rules, and then your tenant violates rules that they didn't know, right? They might think, yeah, I can change the oil in my neighbor's car in my driveway, and they think that's fine. But if the HOA has a rule that says like, hey, this looks like you're running a business, and then the HOA itself fines or charges a fee, they're going to charge it to the homeowner, and then who's stuck paying it, and how can we avoid that kind of miscommunication in the future? I always encourage just as much transparency, to be very thoughtful about these sorts of things, because at the end of the day, like an HOA has a job. They're kind of overseeing the neighborhood to make sure everybody's following the rules, and you just want to make sure everybody involved who's living there, if you're the landlord, knows what those rules are.
You know what? Something else I've seen too that's been happening a lot, and one more so in particular. I have a friend of mine that works for Centerpoint. Centerpoint's not the only company that has company cars and company vehicles. Can an HOA tell you you can't park your company vehicle in the driveway or on the street?
It depends. I
And it's just a
I
regular old pickup truck. It's not one of
Yeah.
those big work trucks or anything like. It's just a pickup truck.
Yeah, it really does depend. I smile because I've helped clients in these situations, and one HOA might have rules against it and one might not have anything against it. Um, I had a client in Tiki Island, right down near now, right by the causeway, where there was a rule about how long you could have your RV parked in the front driveway or how close to the street your boat could be. That's very unique to that subdivision. Coming back to the work truck issue, it just depends on if the HOA has set that rule. And then there's a question on, is it reasonable? Especially if I drive, or I have a truck for Comcast, right? And it's just a F-150, like a single cab kind of situation, and it just has a Comcast sticker on it, and it's always there. What's reasonable? That is where you're going to really want to sit and talk with the HOA. And it's possible for these HOAs to have rules and then have variances for the rules. The key is to make sure that any variance that impacts you as the homeowner, if you're that, if you work for NRG or you got a work truck, you get it in writing, right? You don't want it to be a promise over the phone or something like that. Even email is sufficient as long as it's coming from someone with power to bind the HOA. And so like the power would be, the management company representative or HOA board members themselves, right? Hey, we got together, we talked about this. Here's a variance from our rule. We understand that you live there and you just park your truck because it's too big to fit in the garage. It's not, it's not some 18-wheeler, but it's just too big to fit in a 2-car or 1-car garage.
And how do you ensure that those variances are fair and equal across the board? So it's like, you're telling me I can't have my truck, but my neighbor's got his truck, and then you didn't require the same thing for this one. You know what I mean? How do you monitor that per se or whatever?
So I'm going to say something that might not be nice, not to you, but that's not your problem. That's the HOA's problem. Now, if the HOA makes it your problem, how do you then kind of make sure you're treated fairly and equally under the rules? It's important to, negotiate and communicate and explain, this is where I'm coming from. Here are pictures. It's not just how I feel today. It's my neighbor lives next door to me and he drives for Comcast. I live next door to him and I drive for Reliant. And you're sending me these notices of fines. We either need to change the rule to make some exceptions, or I need to be given an exception and treated equally to my neighbor. It's get more information, try to be as, try to remove emotion from it as much as you can. And it can feel some kind of way when it's your house. Believe me, I know. And then just engage, right? If you ignore it, if you grumble at the kitchen table, you don't get involved, like it's just going to get worse. It can just get worse.
I've noticed also, especially with a lot of condo associations, that they're enforcing short-term rentals for a lot of folks that have these Airbnbs. What have you guys have seen as it relates to changes in the laws and what's allowed, what's not allowed as it relates to short-term rentals or those Airbnb type situations?
So this is not an issue that legal aid gets involved in. It's
Okay.
just not a priority issue for us. There's an overwhelming demand for our services. So it's not something where Samantha or I can say, hey, I've represented a client and this is what happened. Now I can tell you, being aware as a lawyer, aware of the law, there's been a number of Texas Supreme Court decisions that basically say if an HOA goes through its process and follows all the rules that it has to follow and changes its declarations and its bylaws to prohibit, Airbnbs, VRBOs, they're generally referred to as short-term rentals, they can enforce those rules. Now, if they don't go through them, then it's kind of, or you're making them up on the fly, you're impacting my property rights, right? Maybe I bought this, everything was good. I didn't get any notice that you had a meeting to talk about this because you didn't do that. If the process isn't followed, then it's very hard for an HOA to have a strong legal foundation there. But
okay, so that's the part I'm talking about. Like, what's the process for them to be able to change that? Because I know for a long period of time that was never a thing until most recently. Now that everybody's doing these, Airbnb short-term rentals and things like that, that this is now becoming the norm for the rules. What's the process for an HOA changing those rules? Like, do we have to get majority of the votes, or only just the people that actually show up at the meetings have to vote on it, or what's that process?
So that process is going to be laid out in the HOA's declarations or covenants and conditions and restrictions. It'll say, this is what a quorum looks like if we need to modify the covenants and conditions and restrictions or the declarations. I'm talking about the same thing.
Mhm.
This is how many votes you need, and this is how much notice. It's all the process is really going to go back to that fundamental document, which is why I spent so much time on it, of the declarations. That is what gives the HOA its power, and that is what sets the baseline rules for what the HOA has to do whenever it wants to either expand or provide notice of how it's going to change its power. Because you're absolutely right. Airbnb, VRBO, it wasn't a thing 15 years ago. And I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier in the presentation, HOA has been around since the 1950s, at least. I'm sure there's older ones, but some documents I've reviewed are as old as the 50s in the greater Houston area. That's when we had a housing explosion here. And so, yeah, those, if you have declarations that were drafted in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, or even up until 2010, they didn't think about short-term rentals. But again, this is a nonprofit corporation with a private management company. If the laws change or situations change, they'll generally hire a lawyer who will help them follow the process to amend their bylaws, or not their bylaws, I'm sorry, their declarations, to make sure that they are checking the boxes and following the process. Are HOAs perfect? No, no one's perfect. If the process isn't followed, well, we have the right to sue and say, no, this is my property, you're impacting it. And as I mentioned before, there's been several cases that have gone to the Texas Supreme Court basically saying, yeah, the homeowner wins, but if the HOA follows its process, they're gonna be able to amend their declarations and prohibit these going forward.
Okay. And where you find all that out is at that HOA.texas.gov, like
I
what's supposed to
wish
be their process.
where you
And
find
so,
all of that out, where you find all of that I just took you through, is you spend about 6 weeks preparing.
no.
Even,
I meant knowing what the covenants or what the
oh,
definition
my
is of a
apologies. Yes.
quorum and how do you what their process is for changing their declarations. All of that
Yes.
should be explained in the documents that you can find there. If you
Yes.
Because otherwise all of those documents also are supposed to be posted on the HOAs or on the property manager's website, right? For you to be able to go and take a look at.
They're not required to be
They're not
online
required.
like in a website. They are,
Mhm.
most of them are required to be recorded in the deed records. And most counties that maintain their deed records have a way to check the deed records online. Some don't. But to figure out where to look, whether you have to go to the deed records in person or go online, go to hoa.texas.gov, find the management certificate, and it will literally have the file number or the clerk's number on, here's where the declarations are. Here's where the collection policy is. Here's the name of the management company and their email address and their phone number if you're looking for more information, like annual budgets. So that can inform what it is that you want to do, right? If you want to understand if your HOA has the right to regulate short-term rentals, you don't know where to look, start with the declarations. You don't know where to look for that. hoa.texas.gov, get the management certificate. It will tell you where to look.
Okay. And I did include that link in the chat for those that are on the call that want to click that link, but I'll also make that available or make sure that you all have that information as well on the email when I send it out to all of the participants as well. Are HOAs required to update their records for HOA?
Is that one of the questions? I'm sorry, I just
It's
saw
a
something
question
pop
that
up in the chat.
just popped in the chat. Yeah. Update their record. Miss Lorraine, can you unmute yourself and kind of elaborate a little bit at the state?
I'm sorry. I meant to say at the state level. I mean, you said they can go to HOAtext.gov. Are they required to update there too and keep an update on that at the state?
Yes, they're required. Otherwise, that website would quickly become less useful. It was designed to provide, people like you and me, consumers, with information so that it just doesn't seem like you're casting about in the dark. And yes, HOAs are required. If they've updated their declarations, they got to update their management certificate, which needs to be updated on the website.
And how often are they required? Is that whenever there's a change that's made, they have to update it, or is it something that they do annually or once a
So
quarter or something?
it's short answer is I don't know. Short of if they've changed something, they will be required to update the management certificate. So that's kind of like a triggering event. Oh, we changed the declarations. Now we need to update the management certificate, which will be uploaded to hoa.texas.gov. If they don't change anything, I don't know if there's a requirement under Texas law that says Well, you just need to log in and verify everything's accurate once a year or twice a year. Candidly, I've never looked into that.
Okay.
The real estate agent in me has another question.
Go
Uh,
ahead. I didn't know you could separate the two. Like you just human.
like, I don't know, but how do you find out when houses are being foreclosed in a neighborhood? I mean, is it just at that auction?
So every county is required. If you recall earlier in the presentation, I talked about the notice of foreclosure sale. This is a notice that has to be put in the mail. Texas law says 21 days. It's practically 22 days in the mail. When it's put in the mail, it also has to be filed with the county clerk. They're going to maintain records. You can access those records. And there's an additional section of Texas law that says if the clerk has a website, they got to put those foreclosure notices online. So in Harris County, if you were to just Google search Harris County clerk foreclosure notices, you'll go to a website with a PDF that's probably several hundred pages long, and every 3 pages is the new foreclosure notice. If you go to smaller counties, they might have, like I think I looked in San Jacinto County a couple months ago, they had their website and there were 3 foreclosure notices, right? There's just less properties being foreclosed on up there. So that's the baseline. HOA foreclosures have to be conducted by a sheriff or a constable. There's a quirk in Texas law on that. I won't bore you with it. You can also like figure out what precinct the land is located, the house is located in, and then contact that constable's office and say, hey, where can I find the foreclosure notices? It's all publicly, it's all going to be publicly available through the clerk's office. But if you want to get a little bit more targeted information, I'd contact the constable.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Lorraine, you can always tune in for the other foreclosure workshops when we were talking about what the actual mortgage foreclosure process is like, and what has to be posted during what time frame, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what happens when the house gets sold and it's sold for more sold for more than what was actually owed on it, and how do you get that, over. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes along with a lot of that. So there's more, but we've had to break up. So the HOA foreclosure is one of 3 in our foreclosure series. So there's the mortgage foreclosure, the property tax foreclosure, and then the HOA foreclosure. So we had to kind of divide those up because there was so much information about the processes for each of those that we couldn't possibly include all of that information in one presentation. So we alternate each month. So next month will be property tax foreclosure. In June, it'll be the mortgage, reverse mortgage, and HELOC foreclosure. It'll be all of that. And then we kind of repeat. So there's it's different for each foreclosure process. So
Stay tuned.
Just an FYI. Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. So come back, and we are here the 4th Thursday of each month with the foreclosure prevention series.
Okay, Nina, thanks.
Okay.
And if I can
Nia.
give another shameless plug for Nia, like because they record these, if you have clients or friends, family members that need to know this information but can't attend live, please share the YouTube video, right? Like, we update this information annually. We repeat it every 3 months on the different topics, but us being on YouTube and with Amos is just so powerful to expand the reach of this information, because that's why Sam and I are here. That's why my colleague Lauren does these presentations as well. As knowledge is power. Don't want people to lose their homes because they went to Google Lawyer and didn't believe it.
But thank you. It's good information for sure.
Yeah, and we don't keep up with the laws, me myself personally. So we have to bring these experts in so that people are made aware of what laws change, what processes change, what they need to know, and how they keep up with their rights, and things of that nature. So we rely on the experts to come in and volunteer and do stuff like this so that we can get as much information out as we can to as many people as we can to try to protect their properties. So okay. I believe that is it. I don't see anything else in the chat, and I don't see anything else in the comment section here. So with that being said, This recording will be made available and sent out to everyone that have registered for today, whether you are here or not. You will be able to go back and watch the presentation. Also, the link for the Amos YouTube channel will be made available so that you guys can go back and make reference to all the other presentations that we do on a weekly basis. Next week, we will be here with Lone Star Legal Aid next Thursday about wills and estate plans and why do you need it and how do you draft your own documents. That presentation will be next Thursday at 1 p.m. We try to reserve our Thursdays for our asset protection series. So anything related to protecting your home, whether it's clearing title, creating a will, the probate process, foreclosure, all of those are done on Thursdays. If we can potentially, my phone keeps ringing like crazy right now. We will again send out the link of the recording. The resources that were made reference to by Amir and Samantha will also be included in the email that I send out. At the end of the presentation, there's a link for a survey that pops up on your screen. If you guys would be so gracious as to just take a couple of minutes and complete that survey. So one will know that if you received all the information that you actually came here to receive. If you also have suggestions or want more information about some other kind of topic that's pertinent to what's going on in your particular community, then please reach out to us and let us know. So that way we'll know how to schedule other upcoming workshops that we have that are planned if we don't currently actually offer any of those. So we do rely on the feedback of the participants and the folks in the community like yourself to give us that information so we'll know what to do moving forward. So with that being said, thank y'all very much. Again, appreciation to all of our participants, for first time watchers, listeners, for our repeat family members that are coming back and getting this information. We do appreciate your time. Amir and Sam, we do appreciate you guys' time as well for coming out and continuing to participate and get this information out to the community. It is well appreciated. So thank y'all very much. Look for us again in the future with other presentations. We hope you all have a wonderful remainder of your day. You take care of yourselves and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Thank you. Good
Thank you.
information.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Lorraine.